What if the future of Ukraine hangs in the balance of just a few days? Right now, the world is watching as President Trump and his team push for peace, talks to end the war in Ukraine, but there's a catch. The U.S. is losing patience, and if Russia and Ukraine don't act fast, America might just walk away. Could this be the moment that changes everything for Ukraine, Russia, and the global stage? Stay with me as we dive into the latest developments, conflicting messages from the Trump administration, and what it all means for peace in Eastern Europe. This is Focal Point, and you don't want to miss this. Welcome back, everyone, to Focal Point, where we break down the biggest stories shaping our world. Today, we're zooming in on a critical moment in the Russia-Ukraine war, a conflict that's been raging for years, reshaping geopolitics and keeping the world on edge. Just moments ago, President Donald Trump dropped a bombshell about the ongoing peace talks, and his administration is sending mixed signals that have analysts, allies, and even Ukraine's leadership scratching their heads. The big question on everyone's mind: can the U.S. broker a deal to end this war, or is America about to shift gears and leave Ukraine to fend for itself? Let's unpack what's happening, starting with the latest from the White House and why the clock is ticking. Here's the deal. President Trump was just asked about comments from Secretary of State Marco Rubio, who made waves when he said the U.S. needs to decide within days whether peace in Ukraine is even possible. If not, Rubio warned, America would move on. That's a pretty stark ultimatum, and it's raising eyebrows across the globe. When pressed on this, Trump didn't give a specific timeline, but said a resolution needs to happen very shortly. He even hinted that if one side, Russia or Ukraine, makes things very difficult, the U.S. could call them out as fools and take a tougher stance. Now let's pause here. Trump's words are vague but telling. He's signaling urgency, but he's also putting both sides on notice. If you're Ukraine, fighting for survival against Russia's invasion, hearing the U.S. might move on is chilling. And if you're Russia, dragging your feet in negotiations, this could mean the U.S. is ready to stop offering carrots and start swinging sticks. But what does moving on actually mean? That's where things get murky, and we'll get to that in a moment. To make sense of this, let's bring in some expert insight. Retired Air Force Colonel Cedric Leighton, a CNN military analyst, weighed in on Trump's comments, and he didn't hold back. Leighton called Trump's use of the word enthusiasm to describe what he's looking for from Russia and Ukraine a bit odd. Let's be real. Enthusiasm isn't exactly the vibe in a war zone. Leighton thinks Trump might mean commitment, a genuine willingness from both sides to sit down and hammer out a peace deal. But here's the kicker. Leighton believes Russia is stalling. While Ukraine has shown a strong desire to end the war on fair terms, Russia seems to be playing hardball. Leighton argues the Trump administration is making a mistake by not turning up the military pressure on Russia. He suggested options like ramping up weapon supplies to Ukraine, deploying U.S. troops, or even revisiting the idea of a no-fly zone over Ukraine, something that's been off the table since the war's early days. According to Leighton, these are the kinds of moves that would get Russia's attention, not long diplomatic meetings that haven't yielded results. Leighton's point is clear. Russia responds to strength, not just talk. And with the U.S. signaling it might walk away, the lack of pressure could embolden Russia to keep stonewalling. This is a high-stakes game, and the U.S. needs to play its cards carefully. Now let's talk about the mixed signals coming from the Trump administration, because it's causing a lot of confusion. On one hand, you've got Secretary of State Rubio saying the U.S. has days, not weeks, to see progress, or they'll pivot to other priorities. On the other hand, Vice President J.D. Vance struck a more optimistic tone, saying he's confident the war can be brought to a close soon. Hold up. How do you square those two? Rubio's sounding like the bad cop, ready to pull the plug, while Vance is playing the good cop, dangling hope. This isn't just a messaging hiccup, it's a signal to the world that the administration might not be on the same page. Colonel Leighton called it out, saying any administration, regardless of party, should speak with one voice on foreign policy. When the Secretary of State and the Vice President are sending different vibes, it leaves allies like Ukraine guessing and adversaries like Russia exploiting the chaos. So, who's this messaging aimed at? Some analysts think Rubio's tough talk is directed at Russia, warning them to get serious or face consequences. Others see Vance's optimism as a nod to Ukraine, reassuring them that the U.S. hasn't given up yet. But the lack of clarity is a problem. If you're President Zelensky in Kyiv, you're probably wondering whether the U.S. is still your strongest ally or if they're about to shift gears and leave you hanging. Here's where it gets even more interesting. If the U.S. does step back, could Europe step up to fill the void? Colonel Layton thinks it's possible. European leaders might be able to broker a diplomatic deal, but there's a catch. Russia trusts Trump more than they trust Europe. That's a wild twist, right? Despite Europe's strong support for Ukraine and their view of Russia as the aggressor, Russia feels more comfortable with Trump's approach. Why? Because Trump's team has been engaging with Russia directly, even offering concessions like ruling out NATO membership for Ukraine or U.S. troops on Ukrainian soil. If the U.S. pulls back now, Europe could take the lead, but Russia might not play ball as willingly. Layton warns that this could cost Ukraine diplomatically or even militarily. The gains Ukraine has made, both on the battlefield and at the negotiating table, could slip away if the U.S. exits the stage too soon. It's a delicate balance, and the next few days could be make or break. Let's bring in another perspective from CNN's U.S. security correspondent, Kylie Atwood, reporting from Washington. Atwood points out that the White House hasn't said much beyond Trump's repeated calls to end the war quickly. But Rubio's comments after meeting with European and Ukrainian officials show the administration's patience is wearing thin. Rubio shared a general framework for a U.S.-backed peace plan with both Ukraine and Russia's foreign minister, Sergei Lavrov. The message? The U.S. isn't just tossing out ideas. They want action, and they want it now. Atwood raises a critical question. What happens if these talks stall? If Russia or Ukraine don't engage in the next few days, what does moving on look like? Could the U.S. normalize relations with Russia, maybe easing sanctions or striking business deals? Or would they double down on supporting Ukraine with more weapons to counter Russia's invasion? Right now, no one knows, and that uncertainty is keeping everyone on edge. Atwood also notes that the Trump administration might have misread Russia's intentions. They assumed offering concessions would speed up negotiations. But Russia's still not budging. It's a classic case of carrots not working, and now the U.S. has to decide whether to bring out the sticks. Finally, let's talk about Ukraine's perspective, because they're the ones with the most to lose. CNN's chief national security correspondent, Alex Marquardt, reports that Ukraine is understandably nervous. Rubio's talk of moving on sounds like the U.S. might abandon its efforts to broker peace, leaving Ukraine to face Russia alone. Marquardt spoke to a U.S. official who said if talks fail, the U.S. would shift to significant policy discussions. But what that means is anyone's guess. President Zelensky is particularly worried. He's already accused Steve Witkoff, Trump's main envoy to Russia, of echoing Russian talking points. There was even a heated exchange in the Oval Office between Zelensky and Vice President Vance, highlighting the tension. Zelensky fears the U.S. is leaning too heavily into Russia's narrative, which could undermine Ukraine's position. Marquardt points out that the Trump administration's 100-day timeline for peace, set by Special Envoy Keith Kellogg, is almost up. With time running out and the U.S. showing signs of impatience, Ukraine is bracing for the possibility that America might scale back its support. If that happens, Russia could gain the upper hand, and Ukraine's hard-fought gains could be at risk. And there you have it, folks. The future of Ukraine is hanging in the balance, and the next few days could be a turning point. Will the U.S. push through for peace, or will they shift focus and leave Ukraine and Europe to pick up the pieces? This is a story we'll be watching closely, and I want to hear from you. Drop a comment below with your thoughts. Do you think the U.S. should stay the course or take a tougher stance with Russia? And don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit that notification bell so you never miss an update from Focal Point. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you in the next one.